The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the dusty wooden post office, and Lily Norwood pressed her face against the window, searching the handful of weathered faces for the man she'd agreed to marry sight unseen, all while praying that Marcus hadn't tracked her this far west. Her hands trembled as she smoothed down her traveling dress, the nicest thing she owned, though it bore the wrinkles and dust of 3 weeks' hard travel from Philadelphia to this remote corner of Arizona territory in the summer of 1878. She'd answered Quinn Crawford's advertisement for a mail-order bride with desperation clawing at her throat, writing carefully crafted lies about being an orphan with no ties, no past, nothing that would make him send her back to the nightmare she'd fled. The driver opened the door, and Lily stepped down into the blazing Springerville sun, her eyes squinting against the brightness that seemed to bleach everything to shades of brown and gold. A handful of buildings lined the main street, their false fronts promising more substance than they delivered, and she could see the saloon, the general store, and what looked like a small church at the far end. Heat shimmered off the packed earth, and she could smell horses, dust, and something cooking that made her stomach clench with hunger. "Miss Norwood." A deep voice made her turn, and she found herself looking up at a tall man with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of strong coffee. He stood perhaps 6 feet, with broad shoulders straining against a work shirt that had seen better days, and hands that looked capable of breaking a man in half or gentling a frightened animal with equal ease. His face was angular, handsome in a rugged way that spoke of hard work and harder choices, and his dark hair curled slightly beneath the brim of his hat. He couldn't have been more than 30, which surprised her. She'd expected someone older, more desperate. "Yes," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Mr. Crawford, Quinn," he said, and something in his eyes gentled as he took in her appearance. "Just Quinn, please. Welcome to Springerville." He reached for her carpetbag, and she instinctively flinched, pulling it closer to her chest before she could stop herself. The movement was small, but she saw him notice it, saw the way his expression shifted from polite greeting to something more assessing, more concerned. He didn't press, simply lowered his hand and gestured toward a wagon hitched nearby. "My ranch is about an hour's ride. I thought we'd get the license tomorrow, give you time to settle in. Mrs. Henderson, the preacher's wife, has agreed to let you stay with them tonight. Keep everything proper." Relief flooded through her so suddenly that her knees went weak. She'd half expected him to demand they marry immediately, to claim his rights over her before she could even catch her breath. "Thank you," she whispered, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Quinn helped her into the wagon, careful not to touch her more than necessary, and she found herself studying him from beneath her lashes as he climbed up beside her and took the reins. His movements were economical, practiced, and she noticed the way the other townspeople greeted him with genuine warmth rather than the fearful deference Marcus had always commanded. A woman in a blue calico dress waved from the general store porch, and a grizzled old man sitting outside the saloon called out something about fixing a fence that made Quinn laugh, the sound warm and unexpected. "Springerville's small," Quinn said as they headed out of town, the horses settling into an easy pace. "Maybe 200 people on a good day. We look after each other here. It's not like back east, I imagine." "No," Lily agreed quietly, watching the landscape change from clustered buildings to open range. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still holding patches of snow despite the summer heat, and the grassland stretched out like an ocean frozen in shades of gold and green. "It's beautiful." "Your letter said you were from Pennsylvania." Quinn's voice held a question beneath the statement. Lily's heart hammered. She'd been careful in her correspondence, offering just enough truth to seem genuine while burying the dangerous parts deep. Philadelphia. I was working as a seamstress. When the shop closed, I had no family, no prospects. The lies came easier now, worn smooth by repetition. She told them so many times during her journey west that they almost felt true. No family at all. Something in his tone made her glance over, but his expression remained neutral, eyes on the road ahead. My parents died when I was young. I was raised in a boarding house. That much was true, at least. The rest, the parts about Marcus and the terror and the desperate flight in the middle of the night, those she kept locked away where they couldn't hurt her. Quinn nodded slowly. Must have been hard, making the decision to come out here to marry a stranger. Sometimes the unknown is better than the alternative. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Too honest, too revealing, and she tensed, waiting for him to press, to demand explanations she couldn't give. But Quinn just made a thoughtful sound in his throat and guided the horses around a rocky outcropping. I suppose that's true enough. I hope the reality lives up to your expectations, at least. The ranch isn't fancy, but it's mine, paid for with honest work. I run about 300 head of cattle, have a good water source, and the house is solid. I built most of it myself. Pride colored his voice when he spoke of the ranch, and Lily felt some of her tension ease. A man who loved his land, who'd built something with his own hands. That was different from Marcus, who'd inherited wealth and position and used both as weapons against anyone weaker than himself. You have help, other ranchers. She needed to know how isolated she'd be, whether there would be people around or if she'd be completely alone with this man she didn't know. I have 2 hands who work for me, Miguel and his son Roberto. They live in a cabin on the property. Good men, hard workers. Miguel's wife passed last year, so Roberto's been helping his father more. The boy's only 19, but he's got a good head on his shoulders. Quinn glanced at her, and she saw kindness in his eyes that made her chest ache with something she couldn't name. I know this is strange for you. If you want more time before the wedding, we can arrange that. There's no rush. Lily's throat tightened. Every day she waited was another day Marcus could find her, another day his connections back east could trace her movements west. She'd used a false name to buy her stage-coach tickets, had paid cash for everything, had been so careful, but Marcus was vindictive and thorough, and he'd made it clear that she belonged to him, that he'd hunt her to the ends of the earth before he'd let her go. No, she said, perhaps too quickly. Tomorrow is fine. I appreciate the propriety of tonight, but I see no reason to delay. Quinn's hands tightened almost imperceptibly on the reins. All right then. Tomorrow it is. They rode in silence for a while, and Lily tried to memorize the landscape, the way the mountains sat against the horizon, the scattered juniper trees that provided sparse shade, the occasional hawk circling overhead. This would be her home now, this wild, open country so different from the crowded streets of Philadelphia. She'd never seen so much sky, never felt so small beneath its endless blue expanse. The ranch appeared gradually, announced first by better fencing and then by the sight of cattle dotting the grassland, their red and white hides bright against the brown earth. The house stood on a slight rise, a low structure built of wood and stone that seemed to grow naturally from the landscape rather than imposing itself upon it. A porch wrapped around the front, and she could see a barn and several outbuildings behind it, everything neat and well maintained. It's lovely, Lily said, and meant it. The house looked solid, permanent, nothing like the temporary structures she'd passed on her journey west. Quinn pulled the wagon up to the porch and set the brake. I'll show you around quickly, then we'll head into town to the Henderson place. I don't want folks gossiping more than necessary. He helped her down, and this time she let him, his hand warm and calloused against hers. The touch lasted only a moment, but she felt the strength in his fingers, the careful control he exercised to make sure he didn't grip too hard. Marcus had never been careful. Marcus had left bruises that took weeks to fade, had split her lip more than once, had made her understand that she was property to be disciplined when she displeased him. The house's interior was clean but sparse, with furniture that looked handmade and sturdy. A large fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, and she could see a kitchen area with a proper stove, a luxury she hadn't expected this far from civilization. 2 doors led off the main room, bedrooms presumably, and everything smelled of wood smoke and soap. "It needs a woman's touch," Quinn said, sounding almost apologetic. "I've been batching it for 2 years now since my partner sold me his half and moved to California. Gets lonely sometimes." "Why did you decide to marry?" Lily asked, genuinely curious. He was young enough, handsome enough. Surely there were women in town who would have been interested. Quinn was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. "Got tired of being alone, I suppose. And I want children, want to build something that lasts beyond just the ranch." "The women in town, they're mostly already spoken for, and the ones who aren't, well, we've known each other since we were kids. Didn't feel right somehow." He looked at her directly, and she saw vulnerability in his expression that surprised her. "I figured someone from back east might want a fresh start as much as I want a partner, someone to build a life with." The honesty in his words made her want to weep. She was lying to this man, this good man who deserved so much better than a runaway with secrets that could destroy them both. But she had no choice, not really. Going back meant death, or something worse than death, meant submitting to Marcus's cruelty until it broke something inside her that could never be fixed. "I'll try to be a good wife," she said softly, and that at least was true. Whatever else she was, whatever lies she'd told to get here, she would work hard, would earn her place, would try to deserve the sanctuary he was offering even if he didn't know that was what he was giving. Quinn's expression softened. "I'll try to be a good husband. That's all we can do, I reckon. Try our best and see what grows from it." They returned to the wagon, and Quinn drove her back to Springerville, pulling up in front of a neat white house with a cross carved into the door frame. A plump woman in her 50s came out to greet them, her face creased with smile lines and her graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. "You must be Miss Norwood," she said warmly, taking Lily's hands in her own. "I'm Martha Henderson, and you're most welcome. Quinn, you get on home now. We'll take good care of her." Quinn tipped his hat to both women and handed down Lily's carpetbag. "I'll be by around 9 tomorrow, if that suits you, Miss Norwood. We can see the clerk about the license and have the ceremony after." "That will be fine," Lily said, her stomach fluttering with anxiety and something else, something that might have been hope if she dared to name it. She watched him drive away, the wagon raising a small cloud of dust that glowed gold in the evening light. And then Martha Henderson was ushering her inside, chattering about supper and the ceremony, and how wonderful it was that Quinn had found someone at last because he was such a good man, so hardworking and kind, and deserved happiness after losing his parents so young and building that ranch all by himself. The house smelled of cooking meat and fresh bread, and Lily's stomach growled audibly, reminding her that she'd eaten nothing but hardtack and dried beef for the last several days. Martha laughed and led her to a kitchen table where a tall, thin man with gentle eyes stood to greet her. "This is my husband, Reverend Thomas Henderson," Martha said. "He'll be performing the ceremony tomorrow." "Pleased to meet you, Miss Norwood," the Reverend said, his voice soft and cultured. "I hope your journey wasn't too arduous." "It was long," Lily admitted, sinking into the chair Martha indicated, "but not as difficult as it might have been. Everyone was kind." Over supper, roast chicken and vegetables that tasted like heaven after weeks of poor rations. Martha asked gentle questions about Lily's life back east, her family, her decision to come west. Lily repeated her rehearsed answers, hating the lies but unable to risk the truth. The Hendersons seemed to accept her story without suspicion, and she began to relax slightly, to believe that maybe, just maybe, she'd made it far enough that Marcus couldn't reach her. After supper, Martha showed her to a small guest room with a real bed, the mattress soft and the linens clean and smelling of lavender. Lily sat on the edge of it and finally let herself shake, let the terror and exhaustion of the past months crash over her like a wave. She'd made it. She was in Arizona territory, about to marry a man who seemed decent and kind, and Marcus was 3,000 miles away, unable to touch her, unable to hurt her. She undressed slowly, hanging her traveling clothes carefully, and pulled on the nightgown she'd packed, one of the few nice things she'd managed to bring with her. In the morning, she'd marry Quinn Crawford, would become Lily Crawford, and Lily Norwood would cease to exist, just another layer between her and the past she was desperate to escape. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by dreams of Marcus's face contorted with rage, his hands reaching for her, his voice promising terrible things. She woke gasping several times, her heart pounding, before exhaustion finally dragged her under into true rest. Martha woke her with sunlight streaming through the window and a basin of warm water for washing. She helped Lily dress in her best gown, a simple but well-made dress in deep blue that brought out her eyes, and pinned her dark hair up in a style that was both practical and pretty. "You look lovely," Martha said, beaming. "Quinn is a lucky man." Lily wanted to argue, to explain that she was the lucky one, that Quinn was saving her life even though he didn't know it, but she just smiled and thanked Martha for her kindness. Quinn arrived promptly at 9, dressed in what were clearly his best clothes, dark trousers and a white shirt with a string tie, his hair still damp from washing and slicked back from his face. He looked younger somehow, nervous, and Lily realized with a start that he was probably as apprehensive about this as she was, if for different reasons. The clerk's office was a small room in the back of the general store, and the man who processed their marriage license was ancient, with whiskers that hung to his chest and ink-stained fingers that shook slightly as he wrote. He asked their ages. Quinn was 28, Lily claimed to be 22, which was close enough to the truth, and their places of birth. Lily gave Pennsylvania and hoped he wouldn't ask for more specifics. The ceremony itself took place in the small church, with Martha and the Reverend's assistants serving as witnesses. Lily's hands shook as Quinn slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, and when the Reverend pronounced them man and wife, she felt both relief and guilt in equal measure. Quinn kissed her cheek gently, chastely, and she saw kindness in his eyes that made her want to confess everything, to throw herself on his mercy and beg him to protect her. But she didn't. She smiled and accepted congratulations from the Hendersons and the handful of other townspeople who'd heard about the wedding and come to witness it. Someone produced a cake, and Martha insisted they cut it properly, while another woman took their photograph with a camera that seemed impossibly modern and out of place in this frontier town. Finally, Quinn helped her into his wagon, her carpetbag and a basket of food from Martha stowed in the back, and they headed toward the ranch that was now her home. The ring felt strange on her finger, heavy and foreign, a symbol of promises she wasn't sure she could keep. "You did fine," Quinn said after they'd ridden in silence for several minutes. "I know the ceremony was rushed. I hope you don't regret it." "I don't regret it," Lily said honestly. Whatever happened next, whatever consequences came from her decision, she would never regret escaping Marcus. Never regret choosing this instead of the alternative. Quinn glanced at her, something searching in his expression. If you need time before we're properly married, I can sleep in the other room. There's no rush. The offer was so unexpected, so kind that Lily felt tears prick her eyes. Marcus had never given her choices, had never considered what she might want or need. "Thank you," she whispered, and then, because she owed him something, some small piece of truth, she added, "You're a good man, Quinn Crawford." His ears reddened slightly, and he focused very intently on the road. "Just trying to do right by you. You came a long way on faith. Least I can do is try to be worthy of that." When they reached the ranch, Quinn carried her bag inside and showed her which room would be hers, at least for now. It was the smaller of the two bedrooms, but it had a real window with glass panes and a sturdy bed with a quilt that looked handmade. He left her there to unpack while he went to check on the cattle, and Lily sank onto the bed, her mind spinning. She was married. She was Lily Crawford now, wife of a rancher in Arizona Territory, and Marcus had no claim on her anymore, no legal right to drag her back. The thought should have brought pure relief, but instead, she felt the weight of her deception like a stone around her neck. Quinn deserved to know the truth, deserved to understand what he'd gotten himself into by marrying her, but she couldn't make the words come, couldn't risk everything when she'd only just found safety. Over the next few days, Lily threw herself into making the house a home. She cleaned every surface until it gleamed, organized the kitchen according to a system that made sense to her, and started planning a garden for the small plot behind the house. Quinn worked from sunrise to sunset, coming in tired and dusty each evening to find supper waiting and the house transformed bit by bit. He was unfailingly polite, careful never to crowd her, always knocking before entering a room she occupied, asking permission before touching even her hand. At night, she heard him moving around in his own room, heard the creak of his bed and the sound of his breathing through the thin walls, and wondered what he thought about this strange marriage to a woman who flinched at sudden movements and sometimes woke crying from nightmares she wouldn't explain. Miguel and Roberto came by on her third day at the ranch, both men polite and respectful. Miguel was perhaps 50, with weathered features and kind eyes, while Roberto was young and earnest, with his father's eyes and an easy smile. They greeted her in a mixture of English and Spanish, and she found herself liking them immediately. "Mr. Quinn is a good man," Miguel told her seriously over coffee at the kitchen table. "He pays fair, treats us like family. You are lucky to have him, and he is lucky to have you." "The house already looks better." "Thank you," Lily said, pouring more coffee. "I hope I can be useful here. I'm not familiar with ranch work, but I'm willing to learn." "There is always work," Roberto said with a grin. "Never enough hours for all that needs doing. But this is good work, honest work, better than many places." That evening, as Quinn washed up for supper, Lily worked up the courage to ask something that had been bothering her. "Quinn, what made you come to Arizona Territory? You said you built this ranch yourself, but where did you come from originally?" Quinn dried his hands slowly, his expression thoughtful. "Texas, originally. My parents had a small place there, nothing fancy. They both died of fever when I was 17. I sold everything and came here looking for a fresh start, wanted to build something that was mine from the ground up. Spent a few years working for other ranchers, learning the trade, saving every penny. When I found this land, I knew it was right. The water source, the grazing, the way the mountains sit on the horizon, it just felt like home." "Do you ever miss Texas?" Lily asked, fascinated by this glimpse into his past. "Sometimes," Quinn admitted, "but not enough to go back. This is where I belong now. This land, this place, it's part of me." He looked at her directly, his dark eyes serious. "I hope it can become part of you too. I know it's strange being married to someone you barely know, living in a place so different from what you're used to. But I meant what I said in my letters. I want a partner, someone to build a life with. I hope that's what you want too." Lily's chest tightened. "Yes," she said softly, "that's what I want." It was true, she realized. She did want a life here, wanted the peace and safety this place offered, wanted to wake up each morning without fear, wanted to build something good and lasting. She just wished she could tell him the whole truth, could lay her past at his feet and let him decide if she was worth the risk. 2 weeks into their marriage, Lily was kneading bread dough at the kitchen table when she heard the sound of horses approaching fast. Her blood turned to ice, and she froze, flour-covered hands suspended above the dough, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Through the window, she could see a group of riders, 3 or 4 of them, coming up the road toward the house. Quinn was out checking fence lines with Miguel and Roberto, wouldn't be back for hours. She was alone, and terror crashed over her so completely that she couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stare at those approaching riders and know, with absolute certainty, that Marcus had found her. But as the riders drew closer, she saw they weren't the kind of men Marcus would send. These were rough-looking cowboys, unshaven and dusty, and while they looked dangerous, they didn't have the calculated cruelty that Marcus's associates always carried. The lead rider pulled up in front of the porch and called out, "Hello, the house. Anyone home?" Lily forced herself to move to the door, keeping it mostly closed, her body blocking the entrance. "My husband isn't here. You'll have to come back later." The lead rider, a man with a scar running down one cheek and cold blue eyes, smiled, and there was nothing friendly in it. "That's all right, madam. Maybe you can help us. We're looking for a few strays that wandered this way. Mind if we look around?" "I do mind," Lily said, trying to keep her voice steady. "This is private property. You'll need to talk to my husband about any cattle." "Now that's not very neighborly," another rider said, moving his horse closer to the porch. "We're just trying to recover what's ours." Lily's hands tightened on the door frame. Something about this felt wrong, felt dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with her past and everything to do with the present moment. These men weren't looking for strays. They were testing her, seeing if she was alone, seeing if the ranch was vulnerable. "My husband will be back shortly," she lied. "Along with our ranch hands. You should come back then, discuss it properly." The lead rider's eyes narrowed, and for a moment she thought he might push the issue, might force his way inside or do something worse. But then she heard another horse approaching, this one moving fast, and Quinn's voice calling out, "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Relief flooded through her so powerfully that her knees went weak. Quinn rode up to the group, his hand resting casually on his thigh near where she knew he kept a pistol, his expression calm but his eyes hard. "Just looking for some strays," the lead rider said, his tone less aggressive now that Quinn was present. "Your wife said we needed to talk to you." "That's right," Quinn said evenly. "And I haven't seen any cattle bearing brands other than mine on this property. But if you want to tell me which ranch you're from and what brand you're missing, I'll keep an eye out." The riders exchanged glances, and Lily realized they had no good answer to that, because they weren't really looking for strays at all. They'd been looking for an easy target, a ranch that seemed undefended, vulnerable. "Never mind," the lead rider said after a tense moment. "Must have wandered another direction." They turned and rode off, not hurrying but not dawdling either, and Quinn stayed mounted until they were out of sight. Only then did he dismount and come to the porch, his expression concerned as he looked at Lily. "Are you all right? Did they threaten you?" "No," Lily said, her voice shaking despite her best efforts. They wanted to look around and I said no and then you came." Quinn's jaw tightened. Those were the Garrett brothers. They have a reputation for running roughshod over smaller ranches, stealing cattle and claiming them as strays. I should have warned you about them. He reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, and gently touched her shoulder. "You did exactly right, not letting them on the property. But if they come back when I'm not here, you fire a shot into the air. Miguel and Roberto will hear it and come running." "I don't know how to shoot," Lily admitted. Quinn's eyebrows rose. "Well, that's something we need to fix." "This is rough country, Lily. I don't want you defenseless if something happens." He paused, studying her face. "You're shaking. Come inside, sit down. I'll make you some tea." The reversal, him taking care of her instead of the other way around, made something in Lily's chest crack open. She let him guide her to a chair, let him brew tea and press the warm cup into her hands, and when he crouched beside her, his eyes full of concern, she almost told him everything. Almost explained about Marcus, about why she'd really answered his advertisement, about the terror that lived in her bones and made her startle at every unexpected sound. "I'm sorry," she said instead. "I should be braver." "You are brave," Quinn said firmly. "You came all the way out here alone, married a stranger, made a home in a place nothing like where you came from. That takes courage. Being scared when strange men show up at your door, that's just common sense." Over the next few days, Quinn made good on his promise to teach her to shoot. He started with a rifle, showing her how to load it, how to aim, how to squeeze the trigger slowly instead of jerking it. She was terrible at first, flinching at the noise and missing the targets he set up by yards. But Quinn was patient, standing behind her to correct her stance, his hands gentle on her arms as he showed her how to hold the weapon properly. "Don't think about hitting the target," he told her. "Just breathe, line up the sight, and let it happen naturally." Gradually, she improved, and the day she actually hit one of the tin cans he'd set on fence posts, Quinn's whoop of celebration made her laugh despite her nerves. He picked her up and spun her around, his joy genuine and infectious, and for a moment, she forgot to be afraid, forgot everything except the warmth of his hands at her waist and the pride in his eyes. He set her down quickly, looking almost embarrassed by his enthusiasm, but Lily found herself wishing he hadn't, wishing she could feel that moment of safety and happiness stretch on forever. The shooting lessons became a regular thing, and as spring deepened into summer, Lily found herself settling into the rhythm of ranch life. She learned to bake bread in the temperamental oven, to coax vegetables from the stubborn Arizona soil, to recognize the difference between a healthy cow and one that needed attention. Quinn taught her to ride, putting her on an older, gentle mare named Rosie, and together they'd check fence lines or ride out to see the cattle, him pointing out landmarks and telling her stories about the land. She met more of the neighbors, too. The ranch to the east was run by a widow named Sarah Donovan, a tough woman in her 40s who'd kept her late husband's cattle operation running through sheer determination. To the west was a larger spread owned by the Mitchell family, parents and 3 grown sons who were always friendly but clearly struggling to keep up with their ambitious plans. In town, she got to know the other women, Martha Henderson, of course, but also Lucy Chen, who ran the general store with her husband, and Anna Williams, who took in sewing and became a source of both friendship and conversation that didn't revolve around cattle. Life took on a comfortable pattern, and Lily began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she'd truly escaped. Marcus seemed like a bad dream from another life, and while she still woke sometimes in the night gasping and afraid, those moments came less frequently. Quinn never pressed her about her nightmares, though she knew he heard them through the walls. He just made sure there was coffee ready in the morning and asked if she'd slept well, accepting her lies with grace. 3 months into their marriage, on a hot July afternoon, Lily was hanging laundry when Quinn rode up, his expression troubled. She could tell immediately that something was wrong, could see it in the tension of his shoulders and the set of his jaw. "What is it?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron. Quinn dismounted, took off his hat, ran his fingers through his hair. "There's a man in town asking questions. Arrived on the afternoon stage. He's claiming to be looking for a missing woman from back east, says she ran away from her intended husband. He's offering a reward for information." The world tilted sideways, and Lily grabbed the clothesline to steady herself. Her vision went gray at the edges, and she heard a roaring in her ears like a river flooding its banks. Marcus. Marcus had found her. After all this time, all this distance, he'd found her. "Lily." Quinn's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Lily, talk to me. What's wrong?" She couldn't speak, couldn't form words around the terror clogging her throat. She was going to have to run again, but there was nowhere left to run to. Nowhere Marcus wouldn't eventually find her. He had money and connections and the patience to hunt her forever because she dared to defy him, dared to embarrass him by running away. Strong hands gripped her shoulders and Quinn's face swam into view, his expression frightened now. "Lily, you're scaring me. Who is this man? Why are you so afraid?" "I have to leave," she managed, the words coming out choked and desperate. "I have to leave right now before he finds me here, before he knows about you. I'm sorry, Quinn, I'm so sorry. I should have told you, but I couldn't. And now I've ruined everything." "Told me what?" Quinn demanded, his hands firm on her shoulders, grounding her. "Lily, whatever it is, we'll face it together. You're my wife. Let me help you." "You can't help me," Lily said, and she was crying now, hot tears streaming down her face. "He has too much power, too many connections. He'll destroy you just for harboring me. I have to go, have to run again. It's the only way to keep you safe." "Who is he?" Quinn asked, his voice low and intense. "This man who has you so terrified. Tell me his name." "Marcus. Marcus Pemberton." The name tasted like ash in her mouth. "He's from one of the oldest families in Philadelphia, wealthy and connected and cruel. I was supposed to marry him, but he hurt me, Quinn. He hurt me so badly, and when I tried to break the engagement, he said I belonged to him, that he'd never let me go. So I ran. I used money I'd saved and I ran as far as I could, and I lied to you about who I was, about why I was really answering your advertisement. I'm so sorry." Quinn was very still, his eyes searching her face. "Show me," he said quietly. "What? Show me where he hurt you. Show me what you've been hiding." With shaking hands, Lily pushed up the sleeves of her dress, revealing the faint scars on her wrists where Marcus had tied her once when she'd tried to leave. She turned and showed him the small, round scar on her shoulder blade where Marcus had burned her with a cigar when she'd refused to apologize for some imagined slight. These were the marks that had faded enough to hide, but there were others, other scars that were only emotional but just as deep. Quinn's face had gone white, then red, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscles jumping. His hands, still on her shoulders, began to shake with barely suppressed rage. "He did this to you?" "Yes," Lily whispered, "and he promised worse if I ever tried to leave him. But I couldn't stay, Quinn. I couldn't endure it anymore, so I ran, and I know I should have told you before we married, but I was so desperate and so afraid, and I thought maybe if I got far enough away he'd never find me." Quinn pulled her against his chest, his arms coming around her fierce and protective. "He's not taking you anywhere," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I don't care who he is or how much money he has. You're my wife, Lily Crawford, and no one is going to hurt you again. Not while I'm breathing." "You don't understand," Lily said against his shirt, breathing in the smell of him, horse and leather and sweat and safety. "He won't just take me back. He'll make you pay for hiding me, for marrying me. He'll destroy you. Let him try." Quinn pulled back just enough to look down at her, and his eyes were blazing with determination and something else. Something fierce and possessive that should have frightened her, but instead made her feel safer than she'd felt in years. "We'll go to the sheriff. Explain the situation. Arizona territory law won't recognize any claim he has on you. You're legally married to me now. He can't force you to go back." "He won't care about the law," Lily said desperately. "He thinks he is above the law." "Then we'll show him he's wrong," Quinn said. "Come on. We're going to town right now together. You're not facing this alone." The ride to Springerville felt like traveling to her own execution. Lily sat rigid in the wagon seat, scanning every shadow for Marcus's face, every rider for his hired men. Quinn drove with one hand, the other resting on the rifle he'd brought, his expression grim but determined. The sheriff's office was a small building next to the jail, and Sheriff Tom Morrison was a grizzled man in his 50s who'd seen too much of life to be easily shocked. He listened to Lily's story without interruption, his expression growing harder with each detail she revealed. "This man in town, this Pemberton," Morrison said when she'd finished. "He's staying at the hotel, been making a nuisance of himself asking about Eastern women and showing around a sketch that doesn't look much like anyone in particular. Seemed odd to me, man in fancy clothes throwing money around, so I was already keeping an eye on him." "What can we do?" Quinn asked. "Legally, what are Lily's rights?" Morrison leaned back in his chair, studying them both. "Well, legally, Mrs. Crawford is your wife. That's documented and witnessed. Any prior understanding she might have had with this Pemberton fellow, that's not binding, especially since they never married. She's an adult woman who made a choice to leave Philadelphia and marry you. The law doesn't compel her to go back. But he'll try to take her anyway," Lily said, her voice hollow. "Or he'll hurt Quinn, hurt the ranch. You don't know him." "Maybe not," Morrison said, "but I know men like him. Bullies who think money means they can do whatever they want." He stood, reaching for his gun belt. "Let's go have a conversation with Mr. Pemberton, make sure he understands how things work in Arizona territory." They found Marcus in the hotel restaurant, sitting at a corner table with a cup of coffee and a newspaper. He looked exactly as Lily remembered, handsome in a cold way, with pale blonde hair slicked back and ice-blue eyes that missed nothing. He was perhaps 35, dressed in an expensive suit that screamed Eastern money, and when he looked up and saw her, his expression shifted from boredom to triumph, so quickly it made her stomach lurch. "Lily," he said, standing smoothly, his voice warm and concerned in a way she knew was pure performance. "Thank God. I've been so worried about you. When you disappeared, I feared the worst." "Stay away from her," Quinn said, stepping slightly in front of Lily, his body a shield between her and Marcus. Marcus's eyes shifted to Quinn, assessing, dismissive. "And who might you be?" "Her husband," Quinn said flatly. "Lily Crawford, and she's not going anywhere with you." Something flickered in Marcus's expression, rage maybe or calculation, but his voice remained smooth. "I see. How unfortunate. You've been deceived, I'm afraid. Lily is confused, has been since her parents died. She gets these notions in her head and acts irrationally. I've been caring for her, ensuring she receives proper treatment, but she ran away before we could finalize her care." "That's a lie," Lily said, forcing herself to speak despite the fear making her voice shake. "I'm not confused and I don't need treatment. I left because you hurt me, Marcus. Because you were cruel and violent, and I refused to spend my life terrified of you." "My dear, that's the illness talking," Marcus said, and he actually sounded sad, concerned, like a devoted caregiver faced with a difficult patient. It was a masterful performance, and Lily saw doubt flicker across Sheriff Morrison's face. "Show him," Quinn said quietly. Lily hesitated, then pushed up her sleeves again, showing the scars. "He did this, and this." She turned, showing her shoulder blade. "He burned me with a cigar because I wouldn't apologize fast enough for speaking when he hadn't given me permission." Marcus's mask slipped, just for a second, and pure hatred flashed across his face before he smoothed it away. "Old injuries from before I began caring for her. Self-inflicted, I'm afraid. Part of her condition." "That's bull," Morrison said bluntly. "I've seen plenty of injuries in my time, and those weren't self-inflicted. Restraint marks on the wrists, cigarette burn on the back where she couldn't reach, those came from someone else." "Sheriff, I understand your hesitation," Marcus said, his tone hardening slightly. "But Lily is under my legal guardianship due to her mental instability. I have documents proving this, papers signed by physicians and a judge in Philadelphia. She needs to come back with me for her own safety." "She's married now," Quinn said, his voice dangerously quiet, "which makes any guardianship invalid. She's my responsibility, my family, and she's not going anywhere." Marcus smiled, cold and cruel. A marriage obtained under false pretenses with a woman not of sound mind to make such a decision. "I'm certain any court would find it invalid." "Not in Arizona territory," Morrison said firmly. "Now I suggest you finish your coffee, pack your bags, and catch the next stage back east, Mr. Pemberton. The lady has made her choice clear, and we don't take kindly to people trying to force others against their will out here." "I have legal documents," Marcus repeated, but there was an edge to his voice now, frustration bleeding through. "I have the right to take her back." "Your papers might matter in Philadelphia," Morrison said, "but out here, a woman's word matters just as much, and she's saying she doesn't want to go with you. That's the end of it." Marcus looked at Lily, and the hatred in his eyes was no longer masked. "This isn't over," he said softly. "You can't hide from me forever, and when I take you back, and I will take you back, you'll pay for every moment of trouble you've caused me." "If you threaten her again, I'll arrest you," Morrison said. "And if you try to take her by force, you'll find out that kidnapping carries a rope out here, money or no money." For a long moment, Marcus just stood there, staring at Lily with such venom that she took an involuntary step backward. Then he threw some coins on the table and stalked out of the restaurant, his expensive boots loud on the wooden floor. "That man is trouble," Morrison said grimly. "I'll watch him until he leaves town, but you two should be careful. Men like that don't give up easy, and money can buy a lot of things, including men willing to do dirty work." Quinn nodded, his arm coming around Lily's shoulders. "I'll keep her safe." They stayed in town until they saw Marcus board the evening stage headed east, his face cold and expressionless as he climbed inside. Lily watched the stage pull away, dust rising in its wake, and tried to believe it was really over, that he was really leaving. But fear lived deep in her bones now, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning, not the end. On the ride back to the ranch, Quinn was quiet, his jaw set, and his eyes scanning the landscape constantly. Lily wanted to apologize again, to explain how sorry she was for bringing this danger to his door, but the words stuck in her throat. She'd been so selfish, thinking only of her own escape, never considering that she might be putting him at risk. "Stop it," Quinn said suddenly. "Stop what?" "Whatever you're thinking that's making you look like you want to cry," he said, glancing at her. "This isn't your fault, Lily. None of it. That man, Marcus, he's the one who did wrong. You were just trying to survive." "I lied to you," Lily said. "I married you under false pretenses. If you want to annul the marriage, I'll understand. I'll leave, go somewhere else, somewhere he won't think to look." Quinn pulled the wagon to a stop so abruptly that Lily had to grab the seat to steady herself. He turned to face her, his expression fierce. "I don't want an annulment. I want you, Lily. I want our marriage. Maybe it started with lies, but it doesn't have to continue that way. We can build something real, something true." "Why would you want that?" Lily asked, bewildered. "I've brought you nothing but trouble." "You've brought light into my house," Quinn said simply. "You've made the ranch feel like a home instead of just a place to work. You've made me laugh, made me want to come home at the end of the day instead of just collapsing into bed exhausted. I care about you, Lily Crawford. More than I expected to, more than I probably should after just 3 months. But that's the truth, and I'm not letting you go." Lily felt tears spilling down her cheeks, but these weren't tears of fear or despair. These were something else, something she was almost afraid to name. "I care about you too," she whispered. "I didn't expect to. I thought this would just be a practical arrangement, safety in exchange for keeping your house. But you've been so kind, so patient, and I want this to be real too. I want us to be real." Quinn reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his calloused hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "Then we'll make it real. Together. No more sleeping in separate rooms, no more being strangers who happen to share a house. We'll be husband and wife in truth if you want that." "I want that," Lily said, and leaned forward, closing the distance between them. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, Quinn clearly afraid of frightening her, of pushing too far too fast. But Lily pressed closer, her hands coming up to grip his shirt, and he deepened the kiss, one hand sliding into her hair while the other wrapped around her waist, pulling her as close as the wagon seat would allow. He tasted like coffee and hope, and everything she'd never dared to dream of having, and when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she felt like something fundamental had shifted between them. "I'll keep you safe," Quinn promised, resting his forehead against hers. "Whatever it takes, however long it takes, you're safe with me. You'll never have to run again." Those words, that promise, broke something open inside Lily that she hadn't even realized was still locked away. She buried her face against his neck and cried, really cried for the first time since leaving Philadelphia. She cried for everything she'd endured, everything she'd lost, and everything she might finally be able to have. And Quinn held her through it all, his arms strong and steady, his voice murmuring reassurances that slowly penetrated the fear and pain. When she finally quieted, exhausted and empty, he kissed her forehead and picked up the reins again, guiding the horses toward home. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange and red, and Lily leaned against Quinn's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, and let herself believe, for the first time, that maybe she really was safe, that maybe this was truly home. That night, after supper and after darkness had fallen complete and absolute in the way it only did in the country far from city lights, Quinn came to her room and knocked softly. "Can I come in?" Lily was sitting on the bed in her nightgown, brushing out her hair, and her heart began to race, but it was anticipation now rather than fear. "Yes," she said. He entered slowly, his own nightshirt hanging loose over trousers, his feet bare, his hair damp from washing. In the lamplight, he looked younger, less like the capable rancher and more like a man who was just as nervous as she was. "I meant what I said," he told her, standing near the door as if afraid to come closer. "About wanting this to be a real marriage, but only if you want that too. I won't force anything, won't push. We can go as slow as you need." Lily set down her brush and stood, crossing the small room to stand in front of him. "I'm afraid," she admitted, "but not of you. I'm afraid of disappointing you, of not being what you want, of freezing up or panicking. Marcus, he made intimacy into something terrible, something to be endured, and I don't know if I can be different, be better." Quinn reached out and took her hands, holding them gently. "Lily, you could never disappoint me, and anything we do because we both want it, because it feels right. The moment it doesn't, we stop. No questions, no anger, just patience. We have the rest of our lives to figure this out together." The tenderness in his voice, the genuine care in his eyes, gave Lily the courage to step closer, to rest her hands on his chest and feel his heart beating fast beneath her palms. "I want to try," she said. "I want to be your wife in every way. I just need you to be patient with me." "Always," Quinn promised and kissed her again, slow and sweet and careful. They moved to the bed together, and what followed was nothing like Lily's previous experience. Quinn was gentle, attentive, constantly checking that she was all right, that she wanted to continue. When she tensed up, he slowed down or stopped completely, just holding her until she relaxed again. He kissed every scar Marcus had left, murmuring promises that she was beautiful, that she was safe, that she was cherished. And when they finally came together, truly became husband and wife, it was with a tenderness that made Lily weep again. But these tears were ones of healing, of reclaiming something she thought Marcus had destroyed forever. Afterward, Quinn held her close, her head on his chest, his fingers trailing gentle patterns on her back. "Thank you," he said softly, "for trusting me, for giving us a chance." "Thank you for being patient," Lily replied, "for seeing past my fear and my lies to who I really am." "I like who you really are," Quinn said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you feel safe enough to be that person without fear." They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Lily slept without nightmares, safe in the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged. The next few weeks passed in a haze of happiness that Lily had never imagined possible. She and Quinn grew closer every day, learning each other's rhythms and habits, sharing work and meals and quiet evenings on the porch watching the sunset. He taught her more about the ranch, letting her help with smaller tasks and explaining the larger operations, until she began to understand the complex web of decisions and work that kept everything running. Sarah Donovan came by one afternoon with fresh eggs and stayed for coffee, regaling them with stories of the early days in the territory that made Lily laugh until her sides hurt. The Mitchell boys helped Quinn repair a section of damaged fence and stayed for supper, their easy camaraderie and terrible jokes making the house feel full and alive. Miguel's quiet dignity and Roberto's youthful enthusiasm became daily constants, and Lily found herself baking extra bread just so she'd have an excuse to invite them to share meals. Life was good, better than Lily had dared to hope, and she began to let herself relax, to believe that Marcus really had given up, that his threats had been empty. She should have known better. It happened on a hot August morning when Quinn and the others were out moving cattle to a different pasture, work that would keep them gone most of the day. Lily was in the garden, weeding the vegetables and checking the tomatoes that were finally starting to ripen, when she heard horses approaching. She looked up, expecting to see Sarah or maybe one of the Mitchell boys, and froze when she saw three rough-looking men riding into the yard. They weren't the Garrett brothers. These men were harder, meaner, with the look of professional guns for hire. The leader was a tall man with a pockmarked face and dead eyes, and when he dismounted, his hand rested casually on his pistol. "Mrs. Crawford?" he asked, his voice flat and emotionless. "Yes," Lily said, her heart beginning to race. She glanced toward the house, toward where the rifle Quinn had insisted she keep loaded leaned just inside the kitchen door. Too far, she'd never make it. "We've been hired to bring you back to Philadelphia. Mr. Pemberton sends his regards." "I'm not going anywhere," Lily said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm married. This is my home." "That's where you're wrong," the man said, drawing his pistol in one smooth motion. "Mr. Pemberton paid us good money to retrieve his property, and that's what we intend to do. You can come quiet, or you can come screaming, but either way, you're coming." Lily ran. It was instinct, pure panic, and she knew it was useless even as she bolted toward the house. She heard the men laugh, heard the thunder of boots behind her, and then rough hands grabbed her, yanking her back so hard she fell. She screamed, loud and piercing, praying that someone, anyone, might hear and come help. "Feisty," one of the men said, and backhanded her across the face hard enough to split her lip and make her head ring. "Mr. Pemberton said you were trouble." They dragged her toward the horses, and Lily fought with everything she had, kicking and scratching and screaming. She landed a solid hit on one man's knee, and he cursed and hit her again, harder this time, and the world went gray and distant. She felt herself being lifted, thrown over a saddle, her hands being tied, and despair crashed over her. Marcus had won. After everything, all her running and hiding and hoping, he'd won. Then she heard the crack of a rifle shot, and the man holding her cursed and dropped her. She hit the ground hard, the breath knocked from her lungs, and through watering eyes she saw Quinn and Miguel and Roberto riding in fast, guns drawn. Another shot rang out, and one of Marcus's hired men clutched his shoulder and went down. The other two grabbed their wounded companion and ran for their horses, clearly not willing to face three armed and angry men in a fair fight. "If you come back here, you're dead," Quinn shouted after them, his rifle still raised. "Tell Pemberton that. Tell him if he sends anyone else, they'll go home in boxes." The men didn't answer, just spurred their horses and rode off in a cloud of dust, leaving Lily shaking on the ground. Quinn was off his horse before it fully stopped, running to her side and gathering her into his arms. "Lily, God, Lily, are you hurt?" "I'm all right," she managed, though her face throbbed where she'd been hit and her head spun. "How did you know? How did you get back in time?" "Rosie came running into the pasture without you," Miguel said, dismounting more slowly. "We knew something was wrong, came back as fast as we could." "Good horse," Lily said, and started to laugh, or maybe cry, she wasn't sure which. Quinn's arms tightened around her, and she felt him shaking too, adrenaline and fear and rage all mixing together. "We can't stay here," Roberto said quietly. "Those men, they will come back with more. Maybe we should go to town, stay where there are witnesses." "No," Quinn said, his voice hard. "We're not running, not hiding. This is our home, and we're going to defend it." He looked at Miguel and Roberto. "But I won't ask you to stay if it's too dangerous. You both have done more than enough." "We stay," Miguel said firmly. "You are family, and family does not abandon family." Over the next several days, they turned the ranch into something resembling a fortress. Quinn rode to town and came back with Sheriff Morrison and several other men, ranchers and townspeople who'd heard about what happened and wanted to help. They set up a watch system, making sure someone was always alert, always armed. The Mitchell boys came by with extra rifles, and Sarah Donovan brought ammunition and a grim determination to help protect Lily. "That bastard needs to learn that women out here aren't property to be collected," Sarah said, checking the action on her rifle with practiced ease. "We take care of our own." Messages were sent to the territorial marshal, explaining the situation and requesting assistance. In the meantime, the community rallied, people Lily barely knew offering their help and support, because that was what neighbors did in this harsh land. She was humbled and amazed by their kindness, by their willingness to risk themselves for her sake. Marcus's men came back 3 days later, and this time there were 6 of them, better armed and more determined. But they found not an isolated ranch with one man defending it, but a small army of angry Westerners who didn't take kindly to Eastern thugs trying to kidnap women. The fight, when it came, was brief and decisive. Morrison and his temporary deputies, Quinn, Miguel, Roberto, the Mitchell boys, and several other armed ranchers, met the hired guns before they reached the house. Shots were fired, and 2 of Marcus's men went down wounded. The others quickly realized they were outmatched and outgunned, turned tail and rode off, and this time they didn't come back. The territorial marshal arrived a week later, a stern man named James Cartwright who listened to the whole story, interviewed witnesses, and sent official documents back to Philadelphia demanding that Marcus Pemberton be charged with attempted kidnapping and assault. He also made it clear that any further attempts to take Lily by force would be met with the full weight of territorial law. "I can't promise Pemberton will face justice back east," Cartwright told them honestly. "Men with money often don't. But I can promise that if he or anyone acting on his behalf sets foot in Arizona territory again with ill intent, they'll answer to me. And I don't care how rich he is. Justice here doesn't bend to wealth the way it does in the cities." "Thank you," Lily said, and meant it with her whole heart. As summer faded into fall and the air took on a crisp edge that promised cooler weather ahead, life gradually returned to normal. The watch system was relaxed, though Quinn made sure someone was always aware of who was coming and going. No more strangers showed up looking for Lily, and Morrison received word through official channels that Marcus Pemberton had withdrawn his claims and would not be pursuing the matter further. Lily suspected Quinn's very public threat to kill anyone else Marcus sent had something to do with that decision, along with the territorial marshal's involvement, but she was grateful regardless. For the first time since leaving Philadelphia, she felt truly free, truly safe, as if the shadow that had followed her across the continent had finally dissipated. She and Quinn grew even closer through the ordeal, their marriage deepening from tentative partnership to genuine love. He told her he loved her on a clear October night as they sat on the porch watching stars scatter across the sky like diamonds on black velvet, and she said it back without hesitation, knowing it was true, knowing that somehow she'd found not just safety but happiness in this wild, beautiful place. When winter came, bringing snow to the mountains and cold winds across the range, Lily discovered she was pregnant. She told Quinn on Christmas morning, and the joy on his face made her cry happy tears. He picked her up and spun her around just like he had when she'd hit her first target, then set her down gently as if she were made of glass, his hand settling protectively over her still flat stomach. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "Our baby. Are you happy?" Lily asked, though she could see the answer written clearly in his expression. "Happy doesn't even begin to cover it," Quinn said, kissing her softly. "You've given me everything, Lily. A home, a family, a reason to build something that will last. I love you so much." "I love you too," Lily said. "You saved me, Quinn. Not just from Marcus, but from thinking that life had to be about fear and pain. You showed me what love really means." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Lily bloomed despite the discomforts, her body rounding with their child while Quinn fussed over her like a mother hen. He insisted she rest more, wouldn't let her do heavy work, and constantly worried that she was doing too much. She found it endearing even when it was occasionally frustrating, knowing his concern came from love and care. Spring arrived with its usual drama of sudden warmth and new growth, and in late April, Lily went into labor. Martha Henderson came to help, along with Sarah Donovan, who'd assisted with enough births to know what to do. And after a long night and most of the next day, Lily delivered a healthy baby boy with dark hair like Quinn's and lungs that announced his displeasure with the world at impressive volume. Quinn cried when he held his son for the first time, tears streaming down his face as he stared at the tiny, perfect human they'd created together. "He's beautiful," he whispered. "Lily, he's so beautiful." They named him Thomas, after Reverend Henderson who'd married them, with the middle name of Nathaniel after Quinn's father. Little Thomas Crawford came into the world surrounded by love and community, and as Lily watched Quinn rock his son, humming a tune his own father had once sung to him, she felt a peace settle over her that went bone deep. She'd run so far, been so afraid, and yet somehow she'd ended up exactly where she was meant to be. The years that followed were good ones. Thomas grew from infant to toddler to a sturdy little boy who loved horses and followed his father everywhere. 2 years after Thomas's birth, Lily gave Quinn a daughter they named Elizabeth, and 2 years after that, another son they called James. The house Quinn had built expanded to accommodate their growing family. Rooms added and spaces reorganized, until it truly felt like a family home rather than a bachelor's ranch. The ranch prospered too. With Miguel's help and later Roberto's, after the young man married a sweet girl from town named Maria and brought her to live in an expanded cabin on the property, Quinn built the herd and improved the land. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, dealt with cattle thieves and market fluctuations, but always they persevered, the family and their small crew working together to build something lasting. Lily made friends in town and with neighboring ranchers, her initial shyness fading as she realized these people genuinely cared about her, that their acceptance wasn't conditional on her maintaining a perfect facade. She took up teaching the local children when the circuit teacher couldn't make it through bad weather, and started a library in her home, collecting books and lending them to anyone who wanted to read. Marcus Pemberton became a distant memory, a bad dream that had once been real but no longer had any power over her life. She learned through Anna Williams, whose cousin lived in Philadelphia, that Marcus had eventually married someone else, a young woman from another wealthy family, and Lily found she felt only pity for whoever that unfortunate woman was. She hoped the girl had more courage than Lily had initially possessed, more resources to escape if she needed them. Occasionally, Lily still had nightmares, woke gasping with phantom pain from old hurts. But Quinn was always there, holding her until the fear passed, reminding her that she was safe, that she was loved, that she would never have to run again. And gradually, even those nightmares faded, becoming less frequent until they were rare enough to be aberrations rather than the norm. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Quinn took Lily on a picnic to a high meadow on their property, a place where wildflowers bloomed in riotous color and the view stretched for miles. The children stayed home with Miguel and Maria, and for a few hours, Quinn and Lily were just themselves, two people who'd found each other against all odds. "You ever regret it?" Lily asked, lying beside Quinn on the blanket, her head on his shoulder and his arm around her waist. "Answering my letter, marrying someone you didn't know?" "Never," Quinn said firmly. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Lily. You and our children, this life we've built, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Even though I lied to you, even though I brought danger to your door." "Even though," Quinn confirmed. He turned to face her, his expression serious. "You were desperate and afraid, and you did what you had to do to survive. I understand that. And yes, there was danger, but we faced it together and we won. We built something stronger than fear, stronger than the past. We built a family, a real home, and that's worth everything." Lily kissed him, pouring 10 years of love and gratitude into the gesture. "I never believed I could be this happy," she said. I thought happiness was something other people got, not me, but you gave it to me anyway. You gave me everything. You gave me just as much, Quinn said. A purpose beyond just surviving, beyond just working to work. You made my life mean something. They stayed in the meadow until the sun began to set, talking and laughing and remembering. And when they finally rode back to the ranch, it was with hands clasped together and hearts full. The children grew, each developing their own personalities and dreams. Thomas wanted to be a rancher like his father, already taking on responsibilities with a seriousness that made Quinn proud. Elizabeth was fierce and independent, declaring at age 6 that she was going to be a doctor and help people, and neither Quinn nor Lily saw any reason to discourage her ambitions. James was the dreamer, always with his nose in a book or inventing elaborate games that entertained his siblings for hours. Roberto and Maria had children of their own, expanding the ranch family, and Miguel became a grandfather who spoiled all the children equally. Sarah Donovan eventually remarried, a widower from town who appreciated her strength and independence, and the Mitchells sold their ranch and moved east, unable to keep up with the demands of the land. New neighbors moved in, and the cycle of community continued, people helping people, because that was how survival worked in this hard country. When Thomas turned 15, a letter arrived from Philadelphia, forwarded through several addresses before finally reaching them. It was from an attorney, informing them that Marcus Pemberton had died of a heart condition, and that his widow had specifically requested the information be passed along to Mrs. Lily Crawford in Arizona Territory, along with a brief personal message. Lily opened that message with shaking hands, Quinn reading over her shoulder, and found only a few lines written in an elegant, feminine hand. "Thank you for being brave enough to run. Your example gave me the courage to leave before he could destroy me completely. I hope you found the happiness you were looking for. You deserved it." There was no signature, but Lily knew it had to be from the woman Marcus had married after her escape. She folded the letter carefully and put it away, and never spoke of it to anyone but Quinn. "She got away," Lily said that night as they lay in bed, Quinn's arms around her. "Whoever she was, she got away from him." "Because you showed her it was possible," Quinn said. "Because you were brave first." "I wasn't brave," Lily protested. "I was just desperate." "Sometimes desperation and bravery look the same," Quinn said. "Either way, you survived. You thrived. And somewhere, another woman is doing the same because of you." The thought brought Lily an unexpected sense of peace, a feeling that even the terrible parts of her past had served a purpose, had created ripples that spread farther than she could have imagined. Years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges, but also joys. Thomas married a neighboring rancher's daughter and brought her to live on the property, building a house near his parents and taking on more of the ranch operations as Quinn grew older. Elizabeth went east for medical school, determined and unstoppable, and came back certified to practice, setting up a small clinic in Springerville that served the community for decades. James became a teacher, opening a proper school that brought education to children across the region. Quinn's hair grayed at the temples, then went fully silver, but his strength remained, and he worked the ranch until he was well into his 60s. Lily's dark hair showed strands of white, and her hands developed the calluses and wear of decades of hard work, but her smile remained bright, her laugh quick, and her love for Quinn as strong as the day she'd realized she'd fallen for him. They sat on the porch on summer evenings, watching grandchildren play in the yard where their own children had once played, and spoke of everything and nothing, comfortable in the silence that came from years of partnership. The landscape they'd once explored together on horseback was deeply familiar now, Every hill and valley known, every season anticipated, but it never lost its beauty, never failed to make Lily grateful for the life she'd been given. "You remember the day we met?" Lily asked one evening, her hand in Quinn's, both of them watching the sunset paint the sky in familiar shades of gold and orange. "Of course," Quinn said. "You stepped off that stage looking terrified and determined all at once. I thought you were the prettiest thing I'd ever seen, and I was sure you'd take one look at me and the ranch and get right back on that stage headed east." Lily laughed. "I was terrified, but not of you, never of you. I was afraid you'd see through me, see that I was lying, and send me back." "I saw through you eventually," Quinn said, squeezing her hand. "Saw that you were hurting and afraid, but I also saw your strength, your courage, your determination to build something better. That's what I fell in love with, not the perfect picture you tried to present." "I fell in love with your kindness," Lily said. "With the way you made me feel safe for the first time in so long, with how you looked at me like I was precious rather than property." "You are precious," Quinn said. "You always have been. I'm grateful every day that you answered my advertisement, that you took a chance on a stranger in a strange land." "Best decision I ever made," Lily said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Well, second best. First best was deciding to run in the first place." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the last of the light fade and the stars begin to emerge, and Lily thought about how far she'd come from that desperate, frightened woman who'd fled Philadelphia in the middle of the night. She'd found not just safety, but love, community, purpose, and a family that stretched beyond blood to include everyone who'd helped build this life. She'd found home in a place she'd never imagined, with a man she'd never expected to love, and she'd never once regretted the leap of faith that had brought her here. Quinn had promised her she'd never have to run again, and he'd kept that promise, building around her a fortress of love and security that had withstood every challenge. As the stars multiplied overhead and the night sounds of the ranch settled around them, Lily Crawford closed her eyes and breathed in the scent of sage and desert air and Quinn's familiar warmth, and knew, with absolute certainty, that she was exactly where she belonged. The story of the mail-order bride who'd been running and the rancher who'd promised her sanctuary had become a love story for the ages, whispered about in Springerville and the surrounding territories as an example of how hope could triumph over fear, how love could heal even the deepest wounds. Their grandchildren would tell it to their own children someday, passing down the legacy of courage and compassion that Quinn and Lily had built together. But for now, in this moment, it was enough to sit together as darkness fell complete. Two people who'd found each other against impossible odds and built a life that had exceeded both their dreams. The ranch would continue, the family would grow, and the love that had started with a desperate letter and a lonely advertisement would ripple forward through generations. Lily had run as far and as fast as she could, and in running, she'd found the one place she never needed to leave, the one person who made standing still feel like the greatest adventure of all. She'd been broken and afraid, and Quinn had helped her heal, had given her space to become whole again, had loved her through the fear until she learned to love without it. And true to his word, spoken on that dusty road so many years ago, she'd never had to run again. Their story ended not with drama or grand gestures, but with simple happiness, with love that lasted decades and grew stronger with each passing year, with a family that stood as testimony to the power of choosing hope over despair. In the wild, beautiful landscape of Arizona Territory, two people who'd started as strangers had become soulmates, and their love had transformed not just their own lives, but the lives of everyone around them. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth passing down through the ages. the mail order bride who ran, and the rancher who gave her a reason to stay.